Good evening, my dearest hams. Appropriately, tonight's chapter is Rattlesnakes. I am sure somewhere there is a rattlesnake who is reading this chapter to a fellow rattlesnake, but they're calling it humans. Chapter 20, Rattlesnakes. There's great practical value in the art of carefully supervising one's thoughts and motives in context with other living things, particularly with such creatures as rattlesnakes. These wise but little understood fellows, with their poison brewing skill and deadly defense techniques, are experts of the first magnitude in dealing with thought emanations, especially as they come from human. When I first visited those parts of the West where white men and Indians frequently crossed trails with rattlesnakes, and when I had to do so myself, it was a shivery experience. I saw some of them whirl into action with their hypnotic eyes and their lightning lunges with heavily poisoned fangs. They were thorough, terrifying, and deadly killers. One day, an old desert prospector who had had rattlesnakes as neighbors for as long as he could remember told me a surprising thing. He said that while rattlesnakes take special delight in sinking their fangs into white men, they seldom harm an Indian. I asked him why. He did not know and had never tried to find out. In my travels, I found that what the old prospector had said was true. The rattlesnakes were indeed selective. They were biting the white men, and they were extending almost complete immunity to the Indians. I talked to all kinds of snake experts, but none of them gave me a satisfying answer. Certainly none gave me an answer that I would have wanted to try out on a diamondback rattler. Almost everywhere I went, there were vicious and relentless warfare going on between white man and rattlesnakes. It was a warfare to the death of either the man or the snake, but I could find no such warfare between the Indians and the rattlesnakes. There seemed to be a kind of gentleman's agreement between them. In all my journeyings, in deserts, prairies, and mountains, I never once saw a rattlesnake coil, either by way of defense or attack, when an Indian walked into its close vicinity. My dog trains man sessions with Strongheart had shown me the trouble that unseen mental forces can cause in one's contacts with animals, and so I was able to understand why there was warfare between white men and rattlesnakes, but practically none at all between the Indians and the snakes. The situation between the humans and the snakes confirmed what Strongheart had been so patiently trying to teach me, that one's thinking, in all, its nakedness always precedes him and accurately proclaims his real nature and intention. The mysterious human rattlesnake paradox was solved for me by the teaching of a dog. The answer had to do with individual state of mind, with the kind of character atmosphere that was being diffused, with projected thought things or forces. Almost every rattlesnake that I watched illustrated this illuminating relationship point for me. The snakes were able to detect and correctly appraise the particular kind of thinking that was moving in their direction. Having done so, they were ready to deal either as friend or foe with the approaching human body belonging to that thinking. What really happens when the average white man and a rattlesnake suddenly and unexpectedly meet? Having been taught to regard all snakes as loathsome and deadly enemies with no rights whatsoever on earth, the man wants to kill every snake he sees. Something intensely emotional, savage, and violent begins churning within him, filling him with repugnance, horror, and alarm. At the same time, all sorts of malevolent factors latent in his nature flare up and thoroughly poison his state of mind. This invisible weapon, this deadly thought thing, he focuses upon the rattlesnake with lethal intent. Highly sensitive to this mental attack and keenly aware of its source, the rattlesnake, by rapid thought action, poisons its own state of mind and turns it towards the white man with equally malicious intent. Up to this point, the conflict between the man and the snake is mental and emotional. It is a kind of thought vendetta, a condition of mutual ill feelings, in which each strikes at the other with destructive attitudes and intentions. If the white man happens to have a material weapon and is able to successfully use it, he kills the snake's physical body. If, however, the snake manages to avoid the blow and gets it within range, it buries its well-poisoned fangs in some part of the white man's body, and the man keeps the rendezvous with death. While the snake may victoriously jab its fangs into the white man's body, what it really strikes at is the unsocial and deadly thinking that animates the body. Watching the real American Indians walk into the vicinity of the same rattlesnakes, you witness something entirely different. For one thing, you would be unable to detect the least sign of fear or hostility in either one. As they came fairly close, you would see them pause, calmly, contemplate each other for a few minutes in the friendliest fashion, then move on their respective ways, again, each attending strictly to its own business and extending the same privilege to the other. During that pause between them, they were in understanding communication with each other, like a big and small ship at sea exchanging friendly messages. Could you look deep into the thinking and motives of the Indian? You would discover the simple secret of it all, for you would find that he was moving, at best he knew how, in conscious rhythm with what he reverentially called the big holy, the great primary principle of all life, which creates and animates all things and speaks wisdom through each one of them all of the time. Because of this universally operating law, the Indian was in silent and friendly communication with the big rattler, not as a snake that had to be feared and destroyed, but as a much admired and much loved younger brother who was entitled to as much life, liberty, happiness, respect, and consideration as he hoped to enjoy himself. His younger brother had reacted accordingly. I hope that you had the most wonderful evening, that you returned to the jungle well rested and filled in belly and in spirit and in mind and in heart, that you have a wonderful night's sleep, that you wake up tomorrow and your journey continues as splendidly as the journey has been thus far. I love you, Tams Nicholson, and I look forward to chatting with you soon. Good night, my dear.